every major collapse from the Great Depression to 2008 to today's global debt crisis was not a failure of the system, a part of its design, because behind every market crash, every currency crisis, and every accidental recession lies one repeating pattern. A small group always walks away richer, while the rest are left picking up the pieces. This is the story of how financial elites profit from every national collapse, how it keeps happening again and again. To understand how elites profit from chaos, we have to go back to the beginning, to the birth of modern finance. In the late 1600s, Europe was drowning in wars. Kings needed money, more money than their treasuries could provide, so private financiers stepped in, offering loans to governments. In exchange for power? In 1694, the Bank of England was born. But it wasn't a government bank. It was a private syndicate of wealthy investors, granted the right to lend money to the crown and to collect interest from the people through taxes. For the first time in history, national debt became a permanent feature of society. And more importantly, it became profitable. The model spread fast. France, the Netherlands, and eventually the United States adopted similar systems. Money creation moved out of the hands of kings and into the hands of bankers. A new kind of empire was forming, one not ruled by armies, but by interest rates. Fast forward to the 20th century. World War I left Europe in ruins, and with it came one of the greatest wealth transfers in history. While millions starved, central banks and private financiers reorganized the world's debts, nations borrowed to rebuild. Currencies collapsed under hyperinflation, and speculators, those who had converted their wealth into gold, commodities, or US dollars, suddenly found themselves owning what everyone else had lost. Every collapse became an opportunity. By the time of the Great Depression in 1929, the game had evolved. The US stock market crashed, wiping out ordinary investors, but the biggest banking houses, they had already pulled out weeks before the fall, used insider information, media manipulation, and even government influence to time the destruction perfectly. And when panic hit, they used their cash reserves to buy everything back for pennies on the dollar. Within a decade, the same elite families that helped trigger the collapse owned more of the nation's wealth than ever before. The year was 1971. The US dollar, once backed by gold, was now a promise backed only by faith. When President Nixon ended the gold standard ion's wealth than ever before. The year was 1971. The US dollar, once backed by gold, was now a promise backed only by faith. When President Nixon ended the gold standard, he unleashed something unprecedented, a limitless money supply. No more gold to restrain printing. No more fixed value, just paper, debt, and trust. To the public, it was sold as modernization, but for financial elites, it was liberation. Yes. Because when money itself becomes infinite, those closest to its creation, central banks, gain, and their largest clients gain unlimited leverage over everyone else. They can inflate asset bubbles, crash them, and buy them back, all using money they never actually earned. Meanwhile, the average worker's paycheck buys less every year. Inflation isn't an accident. It's the invisible tax that funds elite wealth. The system no longer needs productivity or innovation to grow, just debt. And when that debt becomes unpayable, collapse becomes profitable again. Let's look at how this blueprint repeats. 1997, the Asian financial crisis. Global banks flood Southeast Asia with cheap loans. When local currencies fall, debts become impossible to repay. Markets crash. Western investors swoop in to buy companies and land for a fraction of their previous value. 2008, the global financial meltdown. Banks create toxic mortgage securities, sell them to pension funds, and then bet against their own products. When it all collapses, governments step in not to save citizens, but to bail out the very institutions that caused the crash. Trillions in public money handed to private corporations, and once again, those at the top walk away untouched, even richer. 2020, the pandemic response. Markets crash. Fear spreads. Within weeks, central banks inject over $9 trillion into the system, most of it flowing directly to asset markets and large corporations. Stock prices soar while small businesses die by the millions. And who owns most of those assets? It's the same top 1%, who now control over half of the world's wealth. Collapse, stimulus, recovery, it's all part of the same script. They convert their assets into stable currencies, gold or real estate abroad. Then, after the chaos, they return to buy what's left, cheap. The middle class, on the other hand, gets wiped out. Savings lose value. Pensions shrink. Jobs disappear. The rescue packages that follow are nothing more than debt traps, forcing governments to borrow more, privatize public goods, and sell national assets to international investors. Look at Greece after 2008. Hospitals, ports, and utilities sold to foreign conglomerates for cents on the dollar. A country once sovereign, reduced to a debtor colony. And yet, the same pattern unfolds today, in Africa, in Latin America, and even in the developed world. Debt is the new colonialism, and collapse is the new form of conquest. Over time, leaders have promised reforms, regulations, bailouts, New Deals, but none of them fix the root problem, because the root problem is ownership. The same institutions that cause collapses write the laws meant to prevent them. The same banks that fund politicians shape the economic policies that decide their profits. In the end, the foxes don't just guard the henhouse, they own it. That's why every reform cycle ends the same way. A new bubble forms. It bursts. The rich get richer. The public gets poorer. Look around today. Global debt is at a record $315 trillion, the highest in human history. Inflation erodes savings worldwide. Stock markets hit record highs even as real economies stagnate. And just like before, the wealth gap grows wider. The top 10% now own nearly 90% of all global assets. Meanwhile, the average citizen is told, work harder, save more, trust the system. But the system was never built to serve them. It was built to serve those who control money itself. The next collapse isn't a question of if, but when. And when it comes, those same elites will already have positioned themselves to profit again, just as they always have. Lesson 1. Crashes are not random. They're engineered opportunities. Those who control credit and information can time markets better than any investor ever could. Lesson 2. Real wealth isn't money, it's ownership. When currencies fall, tangible assets, land, resources, infrastructure become the new currency of power. Lesson 3. The only defense is awareness and independence. Diversify. Educate yourself. Don't let fear or media narratives dictate your financial reality. Every empire in history has fallen, but not all for the same reasons. Some fell to war, others to corruption. Ours may fall to debt. Because when a system rewards collapse, collapse becomes the business model. And until we understand how wealth and power intertwine, until we question who benefits when things break, we all keep repeating the same pattern. So the next time you hear about a crisis, ask yourself, for whom is it really a disaster? Because history suggests it's never for the ones who created it. Pause if you found this story revealing. Share it, not for the algorithm, but for awareness. Because the first step in breaking the cycle is seeing the pattern.